this episode of Quakerism. And this episode is going to be my second of my Quaker Testimonies playlist. I started out with simplicity and also talking about what I mean by the word testimony. So if you're new to this video, check out that one so you understand that one, then come back to this one. So yes, the first one was on simplicity, and this next one, following the acronym STEP, leads us to T, which stands for truth. And as with all of these testimonies, I think this idea of truth and Quakers go hand in hand throughout their history. It's been very influential as to what has led Quakers to do and how they live their lives. So we're going to be looking into, obviously, the history of how this testimony came about, what it's led Friends and Quakers to do throughout their history, and how it's changed over time, maybe, and looking at maybe at the end of some practical tips as to how to be more truthful as a Quaker today. So to start off with, as all of these ultimately do, these do ultimately start from the early Quakers of the 17th century. And the way that truth came about in this, in fact, the word truth comes up in one of the original names for the Quakers themselves. They called themselves the publishers of the truth. So obviously very important to them right from the get-go. And I suppose ultimately where it comes from is that I think two streams. The first one being that they were breaking away from the Church of England, which they thought was being sort of the faith and a relationship with the divine was being obfuscated by ritual and tradition that didn't have any place in scripture and didn't have any place in or what they felt was necessary to have that interaction and to have that relationship, and in fact actually got in the way. So the early Quakers a lot did talk about this idea of true worship or true Christian worship, and what they meant was kind of back to basics Christianity, where it's not got all of these unnecessary adornments that Christianity has developed over the 1600 years that it had been in existence. They wanted to go back to what they believed was the Christianity of the first Quakers, of the first Christians. And the second stream that kind of formulates this growing idea of a testimony of truth is they wanted to show what their lives would be with that greater relationship with the divine, and they wanted to do that by showing themselves to be at a higher standard than those who don't. And they believed that one way of doing that was to be, above all, to show integrity and to show truth in all of their dealings, so that they would not lie, and they would be seen in society as morally sound people. And you can only do that if you're truthful. One of the ways that this first really manifested itself, and I've talked about this in many other videos, is the idea that still to this day it's true that Quakers don't take oaths. There's a reference in the Bible, I'll try and find that before I put this on here, where they actually took this from, but the idea that if you say an oath, as in I swear that I'm telling the truth and all that sort of stuff, then by default that's saying that you don't tell the truth all the time, which is what the Quakers are trying to do. So whereas Quakers are very happy to affirm that they're telling the truth, saying that they are only going to be telling the truth now but might not have unless they were forced to, that's something that they didn't particularly want to do, and which as we've talked about many times, when they were taken to court because of all their ruckus behavior, where they had to swear on oath and they refused, that got them into more trouble than they were originally already in. There's a very lovely painting, I think, of George Fox refusing to swear an oath. I'll put it there if I can find it. But it's something that Quakers became very well known for. Related to this, I think, is the idea of integrity. So if you have integrity, then that means that therefore you do not lie, because otherwise a lying person doesn't have much integrity, do they? Wouldn't trust that sort of person. And I think the person that symbolizes these this idea of integrity and truth together is John Woolman, who was a very influential Quaker in America in the 18th century, later came and died in England, and he's probably best known for his opposition to the slave trade. But he didn't just say, "Oh, I'm against slavery," but if you've got slaves, that's fine. he went all out. So he refused to wear clothes that were made that he thought might ultimately come from made by slaves or sold by slavers. He didn't want to use silver in any way because he knew that ultimately that came from people being forced into hard labor in silver mines. He was also a vegetarian. I'm not sure if that fits in with that, but he's obviously a guy who sets himself up with high amount of integrity, and because of that, if he says I'm against the slave trade, if he's being truthful about that statement, he can't then go on and be friends with slavers or um, reap a profit or comfort from anything that's been made by the slave trade, because otherwise that would be untruthful. Another area where the testimony of truth has really come out is in business and enterprise, because Quakers were excluded from many areas of society. They made their mark, I suppose, in commerce, because that was an area what they weren't inhibited from entering because of their religion. And so I've done videos before on Quaker chocolatiers, for example. I've talked about why Quaker oats wanted to take the name Quaker, even though they're not Quakers. And it all comes down again to this idea of truth and integrity. They followed set pricing. They didn't haggle. Because that's lying. You can't say that your turnip costs 10 shillings. I suppose that's quite expensive for I mean, it costs 10 shillings for this person, but costs 9 shillings for your friend or whatever. And the idea of that obviously is coming from the idea of truth, because we don't want to be seen as lying about our pricing or about the value of our product either. I think in the recent centuries, I think also something that's become really important when talking about the testimony of truth is the idea of speaking truth to power. So I believe that's originally a Bayard Rustin quote, though I'm not certain. But the idea, I think, speaks for itself. The idea that just because people in power say something is true doesn't mean it is true. Or also, if the government or the people in charge of the country are doing things wrong, that you shouldn't hold up the truth to that and show them why they're wrong. This has manifested itself in many different ways. You can look at that in the conscientious objector movement during the First World War. You can look at it in the civil rights movement in America. You can look at that in the protests against war that have gone on, and so on, where Quakers have taken an active stance against those in power to stand up for what they believe is true. So I suppose probably this testimony, well, maybe equality and peace, obviously. I'd say this is probably one of the key testimonies that leads Quakers to be so active, maybe politically, because they believe that if something is being done that is morally wrong or morally false, then they must stand up for that. They must stand up for the truth of the individual and the moral truth as well, I suppose. So ultimately, today, I think obviously we've inherited quite a big tradition there with the testimony of truth and what we do with that. And so I suppose first and foremost, I think it goes way beyond honesty, though I think that obviously does form a part of it. I think it's about living in a way which is in line with your beliefs, and so that you live in a way that is non-contradictory. So if you say that you don't buy branded clothes, or that you believe that petrol and using petrol diesel cars or whatever is morally wrong, that you're not then out and about in your car. And that can be obviously really tricky, because you can think something is good, but then obviously the modern world requires a certain amount of people in order for them to function, and so that's where some of these issues and these constraints are felt by Quakers. And I think we'll see that certainly as we come on more to equality and peace as well, because I think it means that if we believe in these testimonies and we believe that we want to uphold them, then to be truthful to those, we do kind of need to be almost as extreme as John Woolman in order to fully uphold them. Otherwise, are we lying to ourselves? And I think that's the pressure that I think Quakers sometimes feel. So some tips then, maybe. How can we be more truthful, apart from don't tell lies? But, I think that's quite simplistic. What's a way that you can be more truthful in a Quaker way. So I'll give some of those tips now. Feel free to add any more if you feel that they're better. I think probably the best one that is the most Quaker is this speaking truth to power business, and this can take, this doesn't just have to be talking to the government or whatever. This could be on a really local level or really like personal level as well. It doesn't mean you have to do it by yourself, though. I think that's sometimes where people feel a bit anxious because, like, well, I know this is wrong, but I mean, I'm just a guy. What can I do? Use people in the meeting, use friends, use family. It doesn't have to just be you. But if you are starting that process, then you're getting others involved as well for a matter that's obviously of importance. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing it. So I'd say that would probably be somewhere to start. If you see injustice or if you see something that is morally wrong, that you are taking steps to stand up to that. It doesn't mean that you have to do that obviously confrontationally at all in any way or by yourself in any way, but to do it in a non-violent way with support, with friends, in order to try and reduce injustice in the world. And probably my second maybe tip to be more truthful is to be trustworthy, to be a reliable person. If you say you're going to be somewhere at a time, become known as a person who will be there. If someone asks you to do something, become known as a person that will do that because you've said you will do that, and that is the truth, so therefore you will do it. Obviously things happen, but if try and establish yourself as a person who is reliable, who is trustworthy, who is known to tell the truth, because then people will obviously trust you more and will maybe give you more responsibility or have a greater sense of see you as someone who they respect, which I think is something that we should probably all want. And if using early Quaker language, if you're setting yourself up as a sign for that, then hopefully others might take notice and say, I want to be more like that guy or girl or whatever, and I want to be more like them as well. So I want to be more trustworthy, and then you're obviously creating a better society, which is all what you want. And then probably my last one would probably use time in meeting for worship to reflect on what you think truth is asking of you to do, or what the divine is asking of you when it comes to truth. If you don't just think, well, I watched Quake It Up and he told me to do this, off I go. Take it to meeting, see what happens. See what if you are going to be upholding truth, how might you do that? And listen to what's being asked of you. Then something might very well come. Maybe something won't come, in which case just wait and see if something comes later. But be open to that to that leading when it comes. I've said before that I think trying to uphold all of these testimonies all at once is very tricky. They do all interlink, which is nice. So, for example, another way of being truthful is to be plain, because you're not embellishing your language and so on, and that leads directly back to plain speech, which we were talking about in our simplicity video. So they do all interlink, but they obviously have different outlooks. What I find quite helpful is maybe focusing just on one for a bit. Not necessarily leaving all the others and be like, I'll be as warmongering and unequal as I can because I'm upholding truth. Obviously, they all link, but maybe making one a focus for you so that you can really give time to that and give what is required of you in order to uphold that to the best of your ability. In the previous video, I talked about the idea that simplicity and truth are more, they start with you, so they are easier to make instant impact on, whilst equality and peace require someone else to be equal and peaceable with. So if you are going to be focusing on one and it's the first time you're doing that, maybe starting with either simplicity or truth is a good place to start, and would probably make you feel quite Quaker by so doing. So I hope that's been useful, looking at where the truth testimony came from, what it's led Quakers to do throughout history, and what we can mean by it now, and hopefully some tips to get you started. We're going to be moving on in the next video looking at equality, which will be the third video. So I'll see you then.
Thank you very much for watching the video. If you liked it, please do click on the thumbs up and the subscribe button to get more videos about Quakerism in the UK today. It really does help, and thanks once again.